Hello and welcome. I'm Joanna Junak and this is GFN News on GFN.tv. Slovenia is yet another European country where the government has decided to implement changes to the regulation of safer nicotine products. Despite the fact that scientific research says that vaping is less harmful than smoking, and Slovenian consumer organizations expressing criticism towards the amendments, it seems that the government does not intend to withdraw the proposed changes. Liza Kaczaszwili, the operations director at the World Vapors Alliance, is with us today to discuss the Slovenian situation on smoking and vaping. Liza is passionate about vaping as a life-saving innovation and is a vapor herself. Hello, Lisa. Thank you for joining us today. Please tell us a bit about yourself and your work around tobacco harm reduction.
Absolutely. So, my name is Lisa. I work for the World Vapors Alliance. I'm operations director right now. I joined around 3 years ago as a community manager, and I think this journey has been very interesting and inspiring for me because I've been working with a lot of tobacco harm reduction advocates, a lot of partner associations, community generally. And the more I work, the more I understand the struggles for the vaping community, and it's an important job for me because I know that what we are doing matters a lot.
Let's talk now about Slovenia and its vaping situation. What's happening there in terms of the use of safer nicotine products?
Yes, absolutely. So we recently got the bad news from Slovenia that they changed the regulation on flavors. And apologies, we probably will be talking about that more, but generally, just to give you a background of what is happening in the country at the moment. So there is a quite high smoking rate. We have around 20% of smokers, adult smokers in Slovenia, which is not a low smoking rate for such a small country, especially. And there are statistics that show that around 2,600 people die from smoking related illnesses annually in Slovenia. Now, that being said, we also have a vaping rate, which is quite low. It's 1.4% in Slovenia. So vaping prevalence of adults is not very high, but there can be an explanation to it. We, by the way, have a very active and amazing partner organization in Slovenia who we talk to usually and get some insight from them. That's Slovenian Vapors Association. So anyone who's interested in learning more in Slovenia can check out their work as well. So vaping in Slovenia is technically legal, but there are so many restrictions on vaping from different fields and aspects that it's very hard and challenging for consumers to buy those products now and for vape shops as well to satisfy the demand. For instance, those restrictions are total ban on advertising, online sales are also banned, so it's not very flexible for consumers to buy vapes. We know now that they introduced the ban on all flavors, which in my opinion will have very counterproductive effects on Slovenia's public health. And it's not like usually when they do flavor bans, they at least keep the menthol, but in this case, they also banned the menthol flavor. They only left tobacco. And there is also quite high tax because there is 18 cents per milliliter of nicotine containing liquid, which adds it up. If you want to buy 10 milliliter liquid, you will buy 1.8 euro more. You will pay 1 euro more, which makes it pricier for consumers, right? To buy the vapes. And one of the main ideas of vaping is that it needs to be more affordable for consumers. So these are the challenges, like regulatory challenges in terms of vaping, while cigarettes are not like it seems to me that the Slovenian government is punishing vaping and they think that vaping is worse than smoking, according to the regulatory framework, if you look at that. And of course, they also have challenges with media, as media is mostly publishing some of misleading or misinformational news, and they are not digging into science. They don't want to publish or talk about scientific evidence. They mostly talk about some scandalous news which we know that mostly are just myths or some misinformation about vaping. That's not only a problem in Slovenia, right? That's a global problem. So all of that combined makes quite at the moment bad picture in Slovenia when it comes to harm reduction. So we have heavily restricted vaping. Also, snus sale, for instance, sale of snus is prohibited. You still can use it. The use is legal. So if you import it for personal use, that's okay. But otherwise, you cannot buy it anywhere. There's no information on pouches. So that makes, on the whole, a picture where the less risky nicotine alternatives are not that much available for consumers, and they either stick to vaping, and that probably results in high smoking rates that the Slovenia has.
So, if Slovenia has a high smoking rate, as you mentioned, why does the government want to implement changes in tobacco-related regulations? And could you please provide an overview of the proposed regulations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think first of all, like I always have mixed feelings when the governments are very prohibitive on vaping, because I feel like there might be multiple aspects of why the government is introducing those types of regulations. First of all, I need to mention that Slovenia is a member state of the European Union. And if we look at the European Union regulatory environment and tobacco products directive, it's not so optimistic when it comes to less risky nicotine alternatives, right? And we will have the review wall of TPD, and we don't know what to expect. And something tells me it will probably be more restrictions rather than progressive harm reduction approach, considering from what has been happening retrospectively, right? And we also have WHO and its framework convention, FCTC, basically. And we know that Slovenia ratified and signed the FCTC in 2005, which is a game changer for Slovenia because they have to align with what FCTC has to say. And we know that WHO has been misleading public a lot about vaping, about less risky nicotine alternatives. Even if you look at their Twitter handles, they have been community noted many times for spreading false information. And we have seen what has been happening at COP10 as well, where the THR advocates were not allowed to speak or to showcase what the contrary opinion would be to what the FCTC has to say, basically. So now that when the Slovenian government is looking at the EU level regulation and also what the WHO recommends them, I don't see why the politicians would have a lot of incentive to dig into the research on their own and understand that there is a lot of science, actually scientific background on why vaping is less harmful than smoking. And there is evidence to that. There is Public Health England, there is King's College Review, there is Cochrane that confirms that vaping is a gateway, vaping is a good smoking cessation method, basically. So all of that together, I think is ignored because politicians don't have an incentive to dig into that. Because WHO is very authoritative, and why should they not believe them? And unless there is a strong consumer voice, I don't think they will have incentive. And my conclusion here is that I think that's why it's crucial for consumers, for vapers, to make sure that they raise their voices, they show politicians their testimonials, they share their stories of how vaping actually helped them, because that's what matters, and that's what can change this direction of policymakers of actually reconsidering this kind of prohibitionism.
Yes, let's stay for a moment on consumers. How do consumer organizations in Slovenia perceive the proposed changes?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a really great partner organization. It's called Slovenian Vapers Association in Slovenia, and they recently launched a press conference. By the way, they should have that on their YouTube uploaded if you want to watch it. And obviously, they are standing against these regulations and they're trying to raise their voices. But right now, they are in minority. So it's especially when the media is very much focused on spreading misinformation instead of listening to those who might have scientific research and background to showcase. So it's hard for them to be listened by politicians. They even were attending public hearings, and I remember talking to them after those public hearings around the bill, and they said, and I also read it in the news, that there were people, public health consultants, who actually claimed during the hearing that there is no evidence whatsoever that vaping is less harmful than smoking, which is a lie, and we know that. So they were basically spreading this false information throughout public hearings. And even though our partner association tried to raise a voice about that and emphasize all the public health benefits that vaping and generally harm reduction can bring, they were not listened to, obviously, because then they enforced the bill on banning all flavors. But they're trying, and I think it's very important that the consumer voice still exists in Slovenia, and I think we need to support them as much as possible. And there was also a very interesting Folos Foundation study published recently in Slovenia, which examined what vapers' reaction would be to flavor bans. And I think that's also very interesting data to take into account, especially by policymakers. 50% of Slovenians who are vaping for the public health, basically health benefits, because they wanted to quit smoking, or they want to abstain from all the other diseases they could get by smoking, and 50% of them use flavors. And most of them believe that basically if there will be a flavor ban, I think I'm not sure about the exact data. I think it would be like 90% of Slovenian vapers who were interviewed, they think that if there will be a flavor ban, the vapers will be pushed back to smoking. And that's not good news, obviously, for those of us who know a lot about harm reduction, right? So I think there was a lot of interesting data which basically showcases and sums up that adults use flavors as a smoking cessation method, and those people who are vapers and they are adults, they love using flavors. I'm a vapor myself, and I don't like tobacco flavor. I never use tobacco flavor, and I don't know what's the point of if we use vaping as a smoking cessation method, why should we stick only to tobacco flavor? Like, that doesn't make sense. So since the main arguments that the policymakers usually make is that adolescents are attracted to different flavors, I just want to make the point that adults love flavors too a lot. And studies show, for instance, that if adults vape with flavors, they're 230% more likely to quit smoking rather than those who vape without flavors. And in order to prevent adolescents from vaping, which is something that we all want, I have not seen a harm reduction advocate who says they want youth vaping. No, that's not true. Every country should implement very strict age restrictions and monitor it through that way, right? So I think I've shifted away a bit from the local perspective of local consumer organizations, but I think they would agree with that as well.
And when considering demographic groups who vape in Slovenia, among which groups is the prevalence of vaping the highest?
Yeah, so as I said, when it comes to smoking rates, we have quite high smoking rates among adults. And they have this National Institute of Public Health that usually should be publishing the data around the prevalence and around how many people are vaping or smoking and what's their age. We know that this 1.4 percentage, which I have mentioned, is regarding the adults. So it's 1.4% of adult population that vapes. It's not a huge prevalence, but still it makes around 26,000 people, I think, who are vaping and who are trying to quit smoking through vaping. And they're also they're not very good on spreading the data or argumentation on whether there is youth vaping or not, but there has been this data where in the gap of 15-year-olds and 19-year-olds, 1%, around 1% of those age group people vape. So it's not as high or hysterical as well, and I think they could monitor that better through age restrictions and make sure that none of the vape shops sell it to adolescents. And also, like, it's more prohibition will be counterproductive because more prohibition means more black market, and more black market means that more youth will be accessing some vapes from the black market, and no one can monitor that, which is dangerous. You don't know what kind of products there are. They might be actually riskier. So yes, so I don't know, sadly, I think right now the situation looks quite pessimistic in Slovenia, but I hope that at some point there is a chance that they might be reconsidering this.
So when will all these regulations be enforced?
So the ban was actually enforced already. So they already banned it. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I don't remember exact date, but sadly the ban is already enforced. Now, how much practical will it be and how much execution will it carry? I don't know. I was reading through this Tolos Foundation report once again, and many vapers were skeptical about execution of this bill. They thought that they would either get them on black market, the flavors, or they would either mix the liquids on their own. So, I mean, that's not good news, obviously. But at this moment, when we have the bill already enforced, obviously it's logical to think that there is a less chance that it will be taken back at some point. There are less hopes for it, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible because you never know what will happen. Some of the bills are quite counterproductive, and at some point we hope that the Slovenian government will understand how much it is jeopardizing public health by introducing flavor ban, and we hope that they will come up with harm reduction progressive approach for their country.
Thank you, Lisa. That's all for today. Tune in next time here on GFN TV or on our podcast. You can also find transcriptions of each episode on the GFN TV website. Thanks for watching or listening. See you next time.